when we spoke a couple weeks ago, and he's like, want to present at the Mineral Exploration Group Society? And I was like, well, really, I work on closing mines, not opening them. Are you sure they're going to be friendly? And he assured me that this is a friendly group, so I'm anticipating absolutely no hard questions. But I did try to think about it through the lens of what do mineral exploration companies need to think about planning for closure. So I do like to start all of my presentations with a land acknowledgement because I am fortunate to be born and raised here in Calgary. And I grew up humbled by the mountains, hiking past those old mine shafts through Kananaskis, Canmore and Banff. And I have a deep respect for the land and know that the land here has a long history and a legacy. And so it's important to acknowledge the land here today and understand that it is treaty territory. We are all part of the Treaty 7 peoples. But especially I want to thank the Indigenous peoples who have been stewards of this land, past, present, and will be stewards of the land into the future. For those of you that I've yet to have an opportunity to meet, I hope you can after this talk, but I want to introduce Okane. So Okane Consultants is an integrated engineering and geoscience consulting firm. And we work with mine sites all around the world on their mine plans to help integrate concepts of progressive reclamation and integrated closure throughout any stage of the life cycle. So we work with mines early in the feasibility studies, all the way through operations to closure and post-abandonment in some cases. Our team operates across Canada, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and for more than 25 years, we've been fortunate to work with clients all over the world. I keep saying the term integrated closure. I promise I will define it. But before I do, we gotta go back to basics a little bit. I think we all know the 5 stages of a mine, right? Exploration, planning and permitting, development and construction, production and operations, that's the good part where we make the money, and closure. And the thing about things that everybody knows, and this is common with most things everybody knows, it's a little bit wrong. Because there's a few more stages in the mine life cycle. After closure, there's post-closure monitoring and residual risk management. And ideally, but rarely, there is relinquishment. And that is the transition of the mine-affected lands to its next highest productive land use. Because one of the biggest challenges our industry faces is understanding that mining is a temporary steward of the lands. I'm going to say that again because I want it to sink in. From a multi-generational perspective, even the longest operating mines are temporary. And integrated closure planning is about operationalizing that understanding. It's about truly embedding this perspective of temporary land use and integrating the concept of closure and post-closure opportunities into the strategic mine plans so that we can prevent some of the underfunded or underestimated liabilities that have been the historical legacy of many mine operations. So the approach of integrated closure planning is around preserving the opportunity for resiliency. It's about creating the capacity for adaptation over the long-term time frame, decreasing environmental closure liability, and preserving the multi-generational value for future land use. So, why? That's nice, Miriam. Why do we need to do this? Because for many years we haven't had to. Well, the first reason is because our investors are asking for it. So I really like this this graph because one of the highest ranked ESG factors facing the mine, highest ESG factors facing scrutiny from investors in the mining industry are related to closure. So, land community impact. A couple of years ago, I had an opportunity to tour a mine in the Latrobe Valley in Australia, where the gentleman who was touring me around the mine was the third generation miner at that site. Now that mine is scheduled to close. Actually, all the mines in the region are scheduled to close because they're all thermal brown coal mines, and the region is transitioning away from coal. And he had so many questions about what were his children going to do, because third generation in the mining industry. And so you cannot separate mine closure from community and land impact. But another top risk on here, tailings and waste management. Tailings dams, tailings lakes sometimes, tailings storage facilities, and mountains of mine rock, often acid and metalliferous leaching, are the legacy of many mine sites to date. So we can't separate that legacy, that closure planning from mining. And then water stewardship. I think it's up there, top three? Yeah, top three, water stewardship. There's not a mine closure plan in the world that can be separated from its water stewardship plan, because so many constituents of concern, whether they're arsenic or selenium or the previously mentioned acid and metalliferous drainage, they're constituents of concern because of their transportation in water. So you can't separate water stewardship. What I think is really funny is mine closure itself is actually on this list, but kind of as an afterthought about midway up. So I think ESG factors are something that the investors are interested in, or at least they were in 2024. And I know what you're going to say. Well, Miriam, it's 2025. The landscape has changed a little bit. We're not necessarily talking that much about ESG. Except environmental stewardship is still the second highest risk for mining operations right now. And many of the other risks on this matrix, like resource and reserve depletion, or social license, like all of these things, or climate change resiliency, all of these things are also related or can be related back to planning for closure or integrating closure planning throughout the life cycle. But the number one risk is capital, because cash is king. So how do we look at capital from the perspective of closure planning or integrated closure planning? Because capital is not just a financial problem. Like, capital is a strategic design constraint. And so the advantage of integrated closure planning is that you bring together the geotechnical, the geochemical, the operational, the socioeconomic expertise together to create a framework for an investment strategy, a design strategy to inform your investment. Integrated closure planning can optimize sequencing to minimize your early capital outlay. It can connect closure designs at the beginning of the mine life to avoid stranded liabilities that could inflate your long-term net present value risk. And it enables scenario testing. So you can do trial, you can do closure trials, and that can help balance your operating expense from your long-term liability. And it improves investor and community confidence because you've demonstrated how the information is going to be used. So even if capital is the number one risk, integrated closure planning turns this risk into an opportunity. Earlier this year, the Global Investor Commission on Mining 2030 commissioned a survey about the role that investors have in a more responsible mining sector. For those of you who aren't familiar with this group, they are trying to maintain the momentum that was part of the investor-led initiative that became the Global Industry Standard for Tailings Management. So Global Industry Standard for Tailings Management adopted globally maybe a couple of years ago, and it is impossible to overstate the impact that it has had on mining companies and their management of one of their number one liabilities, which has been tailings. And what is interesting is that there were some key takeaways from the survey that Mining 2030 did. Unsurprisingly, one of the key takeaways is investors can be inconsistent with how they prioritize sustainable practices. But some of the key issues around climate change and climate change resiliency, water stewardship, and community relations remains those key issues and challenges that investors want to know mining companies are looking at. Also, earlier this year, or late last year, the World Bank posted their guidance on mine closure for coal mines. And I'm going to read this quote because I love it so much from this document. And it is, mine closure should be envisioned as a business strategy that will reduce post-closure risks and could enable increased land use value. The conventional objective of mining for closure has been to continuously reclaim and restore mined out areas to leave mine lands in a geotechnically stable conditions with erosion resistant, well vegetated surfaces and without environmental liabilities in the form of effluences, gas, emissions, dust, or contaminated soil. Going beyond this, the new objective of mining for repurposing is to prepare the lands for the optimal future productive use, enhance their value to support a physical and socioeconomic transition in the wake of mining activities. Integrated mine planning isn't designing with the end in mind, because mining isn't the end use of land. Or it shouldn't be. We need to be planning our mines with the next highest value land use in mind. Investors are also looking for more transparency about this. So many of you I know will be aware that the NA 43-101 is under proposed repeal and replacement. And a couple of the key edits to this that are related to closure planning is they're looking to replace the term local and social and community impact with a broader term, rights holder, to truly understand the impact to the rights holders of land. And one of the other proposed revisions is that the technical reports are going to need to include the dates and sources of any environmental permitting and social disclosures. And so I'm going to talk to you about one of the approaches that we take, which is the closure vision process, which is an excellent way of meeting some of the requirements around environmental permitting and social disclosures. And then also the CIM, Environmental, Social, and Governance Guidelines, were published or adopted in September of 2023. And these require specific disclosures around material closure aspects. So they talk about how mine closure plans should be developed as early as possible in the mine life. They talk about requirements for operators to engage local stakeholders in the closure planning. And they specifically talk about from some of the ESG modifying factors should consider that early buy-in from local stakeholders on closure issues can directly affect them and helps mitigate unavoidable impacts of mine closure to the local economy, which frankly in the long run helps to control associated long-term costs of liability and post-closure management. If we can avoid, I know everybody frequently likes to talk about, well, the NPV says you don't worry about closure because it's 50 to 100 years from now. But I'll tell you, the NPV of a water treatment plant in perpetuity starts to skew those numbers pretty quickly. All right, I'm going to come back to integrated closure planning. Because I've told you what the investors are looking for, and now I want to talk to you about how we do this. So the first step is to build a knowledge base that can inform the closure vision. And the closure vision in the ICMM handbook, or the International Council for Mining and Metals, I believe, handbook talks about the closure vision being an aspirational description of what will be achieved with mine closure compatible with regulatory requirements. It goes on to say that this vision will typically be incorporated an overview of the post-closure land use and will evolve as more information becomes available. Mike Okane likes to tell me that a good closure vision makes people stop and say, that sounds interesting. Tell me more. Because a closure vision isn't a defined state. And that's often the challenge we hear when we're talking to mining companies about planning for a closure vision. They say, it's too hard to know what a community is going to need 50 years from now. Okay, that's fair. But we're a mining industry. We're used to dynamics and change, right? Resources and reserves get recut. Tell me what type of processing plant isn't trying to optimize their outputs every single day. We're used to change. We're good at change. We can embed change into the closure planning process too. So the closure vision defines how we're going to get to the post-mining land use. It defines the need to consider post-closure opportunities, not just the least regret outcomes. Like, I'm going to do this because then the least bad thing is going to happen. No, it looks at post-mining land use as an opportunity. And it should be the overarching commitment that then forms the closure objectives. And you often hear closure objectives defined as safe, stable, non-polluting. I like to take those a little bit further, but that's a bare minimum for a closure objective. And then that informs the closure design, which is what is the landscape going to look like post-closure? Sometimes I say integrated closure planning is like legacy planning, except it's for the landscape. We'll give you an example of a closure vision that we developed for the SK Creek Revitalization Project. So the SK Creek Revitalization Project is one of the, well, it is the first of its kind because it's going through a consent decision-making agreement. And it establishes the requirement for the Tahltan Nation's consent before the project can proceed. And so we co-developed a closure vision through a series of workshops in collaboration with the mining company and the Tahltan. And the closure vision that we arrived at was to co-design and deliver integrated, respectful, and progressive mine closure and reclamation plans to reestablish the health of the land and the Tahltan way of being for future generations following the land's temporary use. Now, does that make you stop and say, that's interesting, tell me more? I hope so. Because I'm going to talk about the closure vision process. And the closure vision process provides a means to evaluate the relevant site-specific conditions in a collaborative manner. It helps us to consider all possible closure outcomes to help define the future land use potential that's going to add the most value to the communities and where the mine site operates. So it's a multi-stage process. We start off with discovery and information review, which then we use to create these informational fact sheets. And these fact sheets are really important to the closure vision process because we want to eliminate the power differential that comes with an understanding or an information differential. We want everybody coming into these closure vision workshops to operate from a shared place of understanding and knowledge. And from that, we go through a series of workshops where we align on a closure vision statement, the closure objectives, and some evaluation tools to understand what is going to be the best option for the site. From there, there's some gap analysis, where we are today, where we can go, and then you can take it in the technical studies for the technical economic assessments, the risk studies, and the additional geochemical or geotechnical understanding of material characterization that needs to occur to support the closure system. It's really important when you're doing this that you're working with communities, you're working with Indigenous rights holders to truly understand the land of the past. So, some questions like how do people engage and connect with the land? We talk to people about sharing their stories, about their lived experience on the land. It's also important to understand the land of the present. How is it today? And sometimes this is the land that's already been disturbed by mining activities or disturbed by exploration activities. Understand how's the area currently being used in light of those disturbances. And understanding what is the legacy that people want the mining site to leave on a day-to-day. And only then can we talk about the land of the future. So I have here a picture of the Kidston gold mine. The Kitson Gold Mine is a mine site in the northwest Townsville of North Queensland in Australia. This mine site open pit mining extended from 1984 to 2001, and it did progressive rehabilitation. Progressive rehabilitation was implemented from 1995 to 2001. The Kitson Gold Mine actually operated with closure in mind, and rehabilitation was at the leading edge at that time. One of my colleagues worked on the plan for the waste rock stockpile, or the mine rock stockpile, where they designed a cover system, specifically a hummocky cover system for water retention. Well, in 2016, GenX Power Limited purchased the Kitson mine with the aim of converting it into a renewable energy or a battery hub. They took advantage of the mine landforms and they put solar panels on the tailings. They did not put solar panels on the waste rock because the cover system was retaining water, not the ideal place for solar panels, but an excellent rehabilitation exercise. The site also takes advantage of the differential height between two flooded pits for pumped hydro storage. And the first energization of this project was in November of 2017. Now, if during the rehabilitation efforts, if we knew that this site was going to be used for a battery hub, a solar and pumped hydro storage, would we have put the hummocky cover system in the mine rock? Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe we would have looked at alternative cover systems that would have supported a solar design. Would we have backfilled part of the pit with some of the tailings in the mine rock material? Again, it was the right decision at the time. It managed the acid and metalliferous leaching, but it also decreased the volume available for the future pumped hydro. And this is where, that balancing that least regret outcome to the opportunity thinking is where integrated mine closure planning comes into play. So these are the opportunities that closure vision can create. And I brought a copy of this book because I think it's a great opportunity to visualize what's possible. I'll leave it up here, we can flip through it after the presentation, but it's 102 things to do with a hole in the ground. And there's lots of examples here of the legacy that mine sites can leave behind. And I have a few on the screen here as well. So consider the La Mine Club in central Mexico. The original mine, El Eden, produced 1 million tons of silver ore, but was closed in 1960. It was reopened in 1975 as a mining museum, with the club as a later addition. Or the Left Down Mine Data Center in the top right there. So that is located in the depths of a disused mine in West Norway, 60 meters below the ground and 700 meters inside of the mountain. This location actually offers a really unique blend of security and sustainability, making it an ideal setting for these critical national e-infrastructure systems. Or we can come closer to home, the Buckhart Gardens in Vancouver Island. What used to be a cement plant on a rich limestone deposit is now a National Historical Site, home to over 900 varieties of plants. Or the award-winning Britannia Mine Museum. Britannia Mine operated from 1904 to 1974. At one point in time, it was the largest copper mine in the British Commonwealth. Working with the province, landowners, community, an intensive remediation campaign was launched in 2002. And while acid and metalliferous drainage is an ongoing challenge at the site, life has returned to the waters surrounding the mine, including house sound. So integrated closure planning creates these opportunities. Developing a closure vision early on in collaboration with community will create opportunities for post-mining communities. But it's a room full of exploration geologists, so I have to talk about the other opportunity at mines, closed mines, which is waste reprocessing. So this is all the rage right now. You see it in the news, you see it in all the journal articles in mining these days, is the potential for metal recovery from tailings could be enormous. There's, 12.7 or so billion tons of tailings produced every year in active mining operations, and there's at least 30,000 tailings storage facilities worldwide, approximately half of which are inactive or abandoned. So there is a industry drive to understand whether there's potential to reprocess from these locations. And this paper that I have up here, a link to where you can find it, is written by some colleagues of ours out of the Colorado School of Mines. And it's a really interesting paper that actually delved into the U.S. industry's practices and current attitudes towards reprocessing. And what they speak to is if a reprocessing operation is targeting the original primary or secondary resource, it's really important to understand why those metals were not recovered in the first time round. And I love this quote from this paper because it says, there was a broad agreement that people consistently underestimate the old timers. That the reality is that extraction recovery was much better than we sometimes give our previous miners credit for. And so it's very difficult to improve on that recovery. However, the opportunity that exists could be towards targeting the metals or minerals or rare earth elements that weren't previously targeted for recovery. And that might actually create a greater potential for recovery. And that's, in my mind, that's the exciting thing when we talk about waste reprocessing. I also like to talk about the increased opportunities that we're seeing from governments in this space. So in the Liberal platform in 2025, there's a specific line around a commitment to accelerate exploration and extraction from recovered valuable minerals from end-of-life mine products like batteries, but also mine waste, to help promote a circular economy. And just earlier this year, the Secretary of Interior in the United States published order number 3436, and this is specifically around asking the office leadership to amend applicable regulations and streamline, where possible, opportunities for critical mineral extraction from mine waste. And what I really like about this order is that in this activity, they specifically say that the activity of extraction from mine waste includes the reclamation, remediation, and restoration of land and water. Because reprocessing is also an opportunity for integrated closure planning. So if we're looking at a legacy tailings storage facility, and we're looking at reprocessing the minerals that might be there, or the metals that might be there, we could move from a saturated tailings dam, which is the most common disposal method, to some alternatives, like a filtered tailings storage facility, sometimes referred to as a dry stack tailings facility, or a paste-thickened tailings storage facility, or a co-disposal landform, where we're looking at sort of tailings and mine rock together to create a geotechnically and geochemically stable landform. And if we look at waste reprocessing from mine rock stockpiles or low-grade ore stockpiles, which are right now the #1 contributor for acid and metalliferous drainage at mine sites, we could reconstruct those post-processing in a landform that integrates source control into the design, and so potentially decreasing the need for long-term water collection and treatment. So mine waste exploration could actually create an opportunity for reprocessing with integrated closure planning to help lead to successful post-closure and ideally relinquishment, so that as an industry we can leave a positive mining legacy. Key takeaways. #1, temporary. Mining is temporary. Land stewardship requires that we understand that and we operate from that fundamental understanding. #2, investors are becoming increasingly interested in post-closure liability and what is possible in the post-mining land transition. #3, a closure vision developed with impacted communities can inform the required environmental, permitting, and social disclosures reporting required in technical reports. And I also believe it creates an opportunity to streamline the permitting process, as well as help create and cement some of the social license to operate that is becoming a more prevalent need in the industry. And finally, mine waste exploration could be an opportunity to integrate closure planning into these sites that have already closed for a positive mine legacy. And that's it from me. I would love to open it up to a discussion, a conversation, or any questions. And I very much appreciate you guys taking the time to hear from me today.
I'll turn on the lights. I see one hand up, so we'll hold that thought if you could. Let's do it.
I'm holding.
Miriam, most interesting project you personally was involved with anywhere in the world?
The most interesting project. Well, one of the things that Okane does through our operations in Australia is we're part of a cooperative research group called the CRC Time. And it's a research group that is exploring post-mining land potential. And right now, we're working with them on a project around residual risk. So one of the challenges that many mine sites have is that once they're closed, they're not sure what to do with the mine site. Mining companies end up holding it in care and maintenance because they're concerned about what residual risk might look like when they transition it to the next land user, when the land user have an understanding of how to manage that residual risk. And so we're working with a project with CRC Time in Australia on defining the different types of residual risk that can occur at a mine site post-closure, so that once those are defined, they can be then managed through typically the classic financial instruments that we already have in place for many asset transfers that just seem to be not applied to CAs on mine lands. Why don't you go ahead?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm wondering, in your opinion, do you think, is there a gap between where the regulatory frameworks are right now, at least in the places where you operate, like North America, Australia, South America, perhaps too, between where the regulations are now and this really great picture that we just painted?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking of some of the recent, tailings ponds, Brazil or Argentina.
Yeah, the Brooklyn tailings disaster in Brazil is typically the one that most people think of, and it is what precipitated the global industry standard for tailings management. So there's a couple things I've seen even in the last, I'm going to say, 5 years. The first is that you can see that mining regulations are changing, like Mines Acts in British Columbia, Ontario, and Quebec have all been recently updated. Western Australia just updated their mine closure requirements. Queensland has the progressive reclamation and closure requirements that they updated a few years ago. Many different states and provinces are looking at their bonding requirements right now to understand if they're ensuring that miners are leaving enough security in the event of an unplanned closure. So I would say there's a lot of evolution happening right now, and the mining industry has gotten together, and Coppermark, the Towards Sustainable Mining Framework under the Mining Association of Canada, and ICMM are working on a consolidated mining standard. I think these are going a long way in impacting the regulatory framework that is going to be required to achieve these things. I will say a couple of years ago at the BCTRCR conference in Prince George, some colleagues and I presented a bit of a cheeky presentation where we were talking to the BC government about their regulations around an end land use plan. Because some of the challenge in the industry is the terminology that we use. When we're talking about end land use plan, we're sort of implying that the end of the mine is the end of the land itself. And I think that creates the bias in people's minds. So even the language in our regulatory framework can sometimes bias the way that prevent people from planning for this. Another terminology practice that we have at Okane is we don't call waste rock dumps, we call them mine rock stockpiles, because nowhere else would you stockpile a potential reserve and call it a dump. But like many low-grade ore stockpiles are just called waste rock dumps. Yeah.
I was in the early 70s, I'm not a geologist. I was in the early 70s when my husband was working on Mount Washington. And I remember going up and down and the acid or whatever, we running in the water. And then I went back again and it was mind-boggling. Who made that transformation?
I don't know that, no.
It's on Vancouver Island, just inland from Comox Courtney.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
So it was
unbelievable.
a small arsenic-rich porphyry copper setting.
yeah. Oh, I'm gonna have to look that up.
And my second thing is,
Yeah.
you know, I also had the pleasure to live in Timmins, and in Timmins, tailings are everywhere. And is there someone working up there to help Timmins? I know it's been in existence for well over 75 years. You know, Timmins, Val-d'Or, Rouen, Noranda,
Yeah,
all of that.
all of that.
Are they doing a plan for
So, Doris, I'm blanking on Doris's last name, actually, she's actually just came out with a book called Sustainable Practices for Mining, and she's actually has started talking about creating a regional plan for the area. I'm not sure how much buy-in she's gotten so far in the Sudbury area, but there are other regions like the Latrobe Valley that I mentioned earlier. They're actually developing a regional plan for the transition of those mine sites because of the 3 different sites. And I think that practice of regional transformation, looking at it from a cumulative effects and a full regional impact, is starting to be recognized as a need.
And the last comment
Yeah.
is, the best thing is that by doing this, you raise the image of mining. Because as a non-person who knows, just had the pleasure of going to the bush, the point of the matter is, if you wanna get investors, you know, it's always been classified as dirty mining. But when you do this, it raises the level, and hopefully investments increase and people are willing to invest and say, well, it's gonna be changed again, and that's a big deal. Money is a big deal.
Absolutely, and I would add on to that, it's not just investors, it's students, it's employees, because one of the biggest challenges the mining industry is having is around qualified employees. And as we have incredible knowledge retiring from the industry, we're going to need to backfill that with experts. But if the mining industry has a poor reputation about being dirty, about leaving a poor legacy, we're not going to be able to get the students into the industry that we need. Yeah.
You mentioned the dreaded 43101.
Yes.
I read about 2 of them a week.
Okay.
They are
Then you know
between-
way more about it than I
They're
do.
between 300 and 600 pages long right now.
Yes.
I have yet to find a single one, and I have hundreds in my computer, that even talks about mine closure and anything to do with what you've been talking about. Not
How
a
do we
single one.
change that? How do we change that?
Well, I have no idea, but if you just add it to a 43101, it'll end up 1,000 pages instead of 600,
Oh,
which
but it'll
means
be a-
nobody will ever read it.
It'll be a way better read though, right? Because I think talking about it post-mining is way more exciting. But I also think like the interesting thing is that the cost curves, you know, that end up going into an NFRD 101, they're underestimating frequently the costs of post-closure monitoring. And I think they're also underestimating the post-closure investment potential. And so if you look at that curve and you said, all right, instead of just doing an investment curve for mining, that then suddenly is gonna drop off, and then it's gonna, you know, just cost money as we monitor and remediate. What if we took the post-closure land use opportunity, integrated that into one business plan, continual capital flow, rather in dividends rather than a stop.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, we all agree. Let's go make this happen.
Just
Yeah.
on that point, in Skagway,
Yeah.
there's a tourist place you go to. It's call it a greenhouse. It's a big Quonset covered in plastic. We saw ripe strawberries there on June 1st. And they said they grew it on an old abandoned US military site that was toxic soil, you name it, just a
Yeah.
fine mine waste. They brought in 10 foot of topsoil from Washington State,
Yeah.
made it into a huge raised bed, and I've never seen anything like it. It was absolutely unbelievable, and
That's
it showed
pretty
what you
cool.
can do with an
Yeah.
abandoned site.
Yeah, there's a mine site in the States that has a beautiful lavender field on it. And they harvest the lavender and use it for soaps and other body products. And obviously, you know, you have to be aware of your soil depth, you have to be aware of your root penetration, so you have to make sure that you're not having transportation of the constituents. But like we've got revegetation and soil experts who know how to do that. Like, and we're working on a really, really cool project actually in Western Australia right now at Mount Wheelback mine site, where we're doing a revegetation trial to truly understand that by planting certain vegetation in the cover system, can we actually manage the acidiferous drainage because of the water uptake in the vegetation itself? So, yeah, it's a whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Yeah.
So you mentioned a really interesting kind of stacked opportunity reclamation project with pumped hydro air storage paired with solar.
Yeah, the kids in mine.
I'm interested, are there other projects like that? Have you considered like pumped hydro plus geothermal plus like an AI data center, like an energy hub?
Love
These
that.
kind of stuff?
So there are other mine sites that are exploring pumped hydro. There's a few in Australia. There's the I think it's Musselbrook, and then there's also another one at one of Evolution mine sites, and they're exploring different pumped hydro options. And in Canada, the Tent Mountain project was actually exploring pumped hydro a couple of years ago. I'm actually not sure where that one is at, but they were also exploring it. Now, your idea of like stacking, additional like maybe like data centers, I think it's a great one, and this is why I'm excited about this, because I think people look at a post-mining landscape and they see a liability. But I think that there's opportunities there. And if we say the only option for closure is to razz everything to the ground and try to return it to previous ecological function, we're losing some opportunities there. There might be pre-existing infrastructure like power, like roads, that communities have come to rely on. So what we need to do is we need to figure out, okay, what is the business case that's going to allow that infrastructure to stay that will support the communities into the future? Because I think we need to avoid mining resulting in ghost towns. Mining creates communities around it, and I think integrated mine closure planning creates an opportunity to keep those communities.
So kind of building on that,
Yeah.
like have you guys been looking for high potential areas to have someone pay you to take a liability that you know you can turn into like one of these assets?
Well, we're a consulting firm, so we would definitely have the expertise to help with that. But yeah, that would be pretty. If you got any ideas, I'm all ears. Yeah. Yes.
I have always been very interested in the way at the initial of any mining project, in where you have to design, plan, and go to the end, to the closure. There should be an environmental impact assessment to be done at the beginning, which it is a tie link between the technicalities of the mining itself, plus the environmental impacts. So that type of stage in a project is very scientifically done by extremely specialists in each one of the subjects of the science. And then in your presentation, you in one of the steps that it's supposed to be follow, there is one in where you go with the stakeholders of the location. It might be very easy if mine goes to a very isolated place in where what is going to be left will be probably the mining camp and the road that the company may build. But when it is in a populated area, so you have to match, align two different languages. That very sophisticated and high specialist language with the stakeholders that probably are not on the same level. So how that at the beginning from year zero can be matched?
I have an incredible group of talented colleagues that have been working on this. And some of the things that they do is, when we're talking about heights, for example, right? Instead of, the mine rock stockpile is going to be, I'm throwing out numbers they're not going to match, but 20 meters high, they might say the mine rock stockpile is going to grow to the height of a spruce tree, or it's going to reach the height of a spruce tree. And that's their area of expertise, is translating the really technical topics to the ones that we can talk to with community. Like another example is when people often talk about water quality impacts, right? They're like, well, you know, your water quality discharge can have, you know, X percentage of selenium or X ppm of selenium in it, right? But when we're working with community, that might translate to how many fish are safe to eat. And that's essentially, you translate the technical topics into what matters to people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Miriam, in recent years, we've heard a lot in Alberta about coal mines, opening new coal mines, or rehabilitating coal mines. The big concern is selenium leaching.
Yes.
And getting into magnitudes of selenium that are higher than the current standards. Do you know if there's a database prior to these mines operating where drainage systems, creeks and rivers have been sampled for selenium? So we know what the natural selenium level was in the waters, you know, draining across areas that have not say, you know, before coal operation, there was always, you know, coal beds exposed at surface and subject to leaching.
Yeah, I don't know specifically of that. I know that that's a common challenge we face, is that, you know, we might come into a mine site that's, you know, been abandoned. It might be, you know, 10, 15 years post-abandoned. And when we're trying to understand what is a realistic water quality discharge requirement, it's really difficult when there wasn't the historical data to justify that. Specifically with selenium, I think that there's fantastic opportunities in this space of redevelopment. Like my colleagues at Okane published a guidance document with the International Network for Acid Prevention around how to build mine rock stockpiles in such a way to manage selenium by creating a suboxic zone. And we currently have field scale trials of that occurring right now in the Elk Valley. So I think that there's fantastic opportunities in that space, but yeah, I don't know specifically about the historical data.
Just looking at the time, it's 1:45. Miriam, you have time to stay a little bit
Yeah,
longer?
absolutely.
So with that, if you can help me thank Miriam for first class presentation today.